Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
We've had terrible news coming in from Nagaland, in fact, from one of the most remote districts of Nagaland, Mon, where at least 13 or maybe 13 to 15 villagers, tribal villagers, were killed in an army ambush gone wrong. It looks like the army was led into a trap in the sense of somebody giving them wrong information. At least that's what the army is saying. And they thought they were carrying out an operation and trapping some insurgents from one of the groups which is not part of the ceasefire with Government of India, and they were taking action on them. And what they hit, in fact, was a vehicle bringing in coal mining laborers, very poor people of the local Konyak tribe community. And they got killed, and then there were reprisals. The villagers got together. Nagas, when they get angry, they can get daws, which are machetes, and they know how to fight. So they came back and they attacked the army, and there was again more fracas and more people got killed. So it looks like 13 to 15 villagers got killed, unfortunately, and equally unfortunately, one army Jawan also died and some more were injured. After that, local tribals also tried to ransack the Assam Rifles camp there. That was also a very tense situation. Now, Home Minister Amit Shah has expressed regrets over this in Parliament. Everybody, this is cut across party lines, everybody in Parliament has expressed horror and shock over this. First of all, that's unusual. That's unusual for an insurgency hit area. Usually in our politics, particularly what is called as national politics, the level of tolerance for excesses in insurgency hit areas, especially areas where Armed Forces Special Powers Act has been promulgated, the tolerance level is quite high. So a lot of the excesses are just ignored. Ke hota hai, or these things happen, or there is a tendency to believe the armed forces story. In this case, there are key differences, and we need to understand that. First of all, the armed forces have not given some fanciful story that they actually had. First of all, that these people were all insurgents. It's easy to do this in these areas. They were all insurgents. You can also make sure that weapons are recovered on their bodies. No such thing was tried. And not only is there no usual denial and no usual defensiveness, but actually a degree of contrition about this quote-unquote encounter. So the Home Minister said that a special investigating team has been set up and inquiry is being carried out. The army itself, which was very quick to express regrets, it's rare for the army, has said that they've ordered a court of inquiry. And this court of inquiry, my colleague Snehesh Alex Philip, who is our defense editor, he tells me this will be headed by a major general at that level from the Third Corps. Third Corps is based in Dimapur. That is generally the counter-insurgency corps in the northeast. And the unit involved, it seems, was a special forces unit. And then all the political forces, including the BJP. In fact, it's probably the first time that in an AFSPA zone, a BJP government has expressed regrets over an operation, right? A lot of people in Kashmir are noticing the difference between what might have happened in Kashmir and Nagaland. Now, Nagaland is a very sensitive place right now. And I will be talking in greater detail about that. I also shared with you my earlier primer on the Naga issue. Yesterday, on a Sunday, I pulled out a 2-year-old Cut the Clutter, and we abridged it and we shared with you. And I know a lot of you watched it, because that is the basic facts of the Naga problem. So I will not go over that. I will talk about this, how this is relevant now, and also remind you that as we talk, one of our reporters, our young reporter, our new Northeast correspondent, Agna Chakravarti, who was in Shillong just last week as Mukul Sangma and others joined TMC. She also interviewed the Chief Minister and the Governor and Mukul Sangma. She's already reached Mon and is reporting from there. So our young reporters reach everywhere, wherever there is a story. Now, this unfortunately is a very bad news story, but even when there is good news story, our reporters get there. So we just had, just couple of days back, Unnati Sharma in Yamunanagar reporting on this village where a former professor who came back to his village became a sarpanch and has now completely transformed his village. Similarly, in Uttar Pradesh, we've had Jyoti Yadav reporting on several things, but also very interestingly and very importantly, a story about stringers, or what is part-time journalists in small town India, particularly in the Hindi heartland, actually all over the country, small town journalists who are paid very little, but who are driven either by adventure or a sense of importance or whatever. All journalists have to have a little bit of madness in their heads. I do too. So they are working as journalists, paid very little security for them, very little safety for them. Police goes after them, and you saw what happened in Lakhimpur Khedi. One of them got murdered also in those disturbances. So she's put that story together. So just to remind you that all this happens because many of you support us, because many of you take paid subscriptions. It costs a lot of money to have reporters go out everywhere and do a thorough, professional, accurate job of bringing us stories, good as well as bad, right? What does journalism do? We hold the mirror to ourselves, and sometimes what we see in the mirror looks good, it makes us happy. Sometimes what we see in the mirror does not make us happy, but remember, a mirror doesn't lie. But for that mirror to be held to us, we need reporters, journalists going out. That is only possible if you take paid subscriptions. So please take subscriptions. If you have subscriptions already, please top up. You can't pay on a month-on-month basis. Unfortunately, because of the RBI's dictatorial decision to stop those for whatever reason, that's never been explained to us. So please do top up and keep paying. And meanwhile, I bring you back to what happened in Mon District. Now, what is Mon District? Mon District is part of a large region which is today called Eastern Nagaland. So look at the map of Nagaland. There's a distinctive eastern zone in Nagaland, very large, quite sparsely populated. And distinctively eastern, I'm saying, also because this is the only zone in Nagaland which also borders Arunachal Pradesh, right? A lot of Arunachal Pradesh. So that is the reason you see quite often some insurgents or some ambushes or some clashes in Nagaland, Tirap and other districts also, Khonsa, Tirap, those areas, because that then becomes kind of a route to Myanmar. And that place is also not that far. I mean, everything is far in the end, but in terms of the larger geography, that is also the shortest access to the Chinese mainland from Nagaland. Also, many of the tribes in these districts of Nagaland are the cousins of tribes in, say, Mon Tuensang district. So Mon district was part of this larger entity which was earlier called the Tuensang region. Now, Tuensang region or Tuensang district of the past has now become 5 districts. There is Mon, M-O-N, Longleng, Kifire, Noklak, and of course, Tuensang itself, right? Now, the history is that until mid-50s, these districts were not part of Nagaland. Until mid-50s, these districts were part of what is called as NEFA, of what was called as NEFA, which is the Northeast Frontier Agency, which today is now more or less Arunachal Pradesh. So these districts were part of that larger frontier region. It's only mid-50s that Jawaharlal Nehru's government, and this is just after Naga insurgency started, the first signs of Naga insurgency, that these districts were taken out of NEFA and they were made part of Naga Hills district. So this Tuensang Administrative Circle, which was set up in 1948, in fact, if you go backwards until 1902, even the Imperial British government did not control this area because they thought this was too remote and too far, so they had let it be. It's only in 1902 that they brought in some kind of a nominal control over this area, and then 1948, as India became independent, it was called Tuensang Administrative Circle. It was a Part B district, Part B tribal district, as per the 6th schedule of our Constitution. In 1957, it was made part of Naga Hills. And by this time, Naga insurgency was peaking. So once again, Delhi got sensitized about Nagaland. There was a big security threat in Nagaland. And remember, then what is today Bangladesh was East Pakistan. So there were hostile powers not that far from this region. And so Government of India decided to bring all the Naga tribes together. We keep telling you that Naga tribes are not one tribe. There is a whole bunch of tribes. Depending on how you count, they can be 14 to 28 to 60 to 70, but generally 14 major tribes or about 29 major sub-major tribes. Konyak people, who are the main inhabitants of what was then Tuensang administrative area, which is now 5 districts, they are the largest tribe in Nagaland. That's what we have to understand. They are the largest tribe. They are also, all Naga tribes are warrior tribes, right? All Naga people are warrior people because that's been the tradition, hunting, warfare. Konyaks in particular have been so very ferocious warriors. In fact, they were the last to give up the traditional practice of head hunting. In fact, early days, even when you visited Konyak homes, you found skulls hanging outside, particularly in front of the village chief's house, because the village chief status came from how many skulls he or maybe his ancestors had collected. British missionaries began to work against this. This was greatly discouraged and nearly stopped. 1960s, Government of India banned it. Maybe for a few more years it continued here and there, but then modernity came in and that practice has stopped. Now, it is in that area that the army carried out this operation. Now, you have to understand why this area is tactically important also in terms of the ground situation in Nagaland. Now, most of the Naga groups, most of the Naga insurgent groups, especially NSCN IM, that is National Socialist Council of Nagaland, IM stands for Isaac and Muiwa. Isaac Chishisu, who was a Sema tribal, he passed away. Muiwa is still there, Thangal and Muiwa is still there. He is very old now, not that well. Also, he's a Tangkhul Naga. Tangkhuls are a tribe that does not live in Nagaland. Tangkhul is a tribe that lives in Manipur, in adjoining Manipur, mainly in the district of Ukhrul. So the leader of NSCN right now is a Tangkhul who is a Naga from another state. Whereas the largest tribe, the Konyaks, generally have been in favor of peace. And many Konyak groups have been favorably inclined to peace, and that is why getting Konyaks angry right now is very bad for India's national interest. The second point is that when NSC and IM signed up the ceasefire deal with Government of India, that was almost 16 years ago. After that, 14 years after that, one faction in NSCN got impatient and they said the ceasefire is achieving nothing and we are abrogating this ceasefire. We should abrogate. Now, Isaac and Muiwa did not accept that. So SS Khaplang, who was a Hemi Naga from adjoining Burma then or Myanmar, he said, I am breaking away. So he created a breakaway faction called NSCN-K, NSCN Khaplang. Now, because he was a Burmese, he was not even Indian, he wasn't taken that seriously by all the other Nagas. But the Nagas are pan-national tribes. Tangkhuls are found in Burma, Konyaks are found in Burma, many are found in Arunachal Pradesh. So these are tribes that are spread over. Khaplang died in 2017. It was widely believed that now his group will go away, but his group still not is a signatory to the ceasefire. And because the group is not a signatory to the ceasefire, the army would say that we are within our rights to carry out an operation if we have information about this particular group. Under the ceasefire agreement, army cannot carry out any operations against NSCN or all the others who are signatories to the ceasefire. In fact, if anything, NSCN not that far away from Kohima, in a place called Hebron or what they call as Hebron, they have a large camp with hundreds of armed people there where they run their quote-unquote administration, is a semblance of some kind of a government, and government and the armed forces do not interfere with that because they are being given time while negotiations are going on. The fact is, negotiations have gone on too long. Once again, how does this complication come in? This complication started because as India came into being, India was struggling to reach out to its boundaries. India had complicated boundaries because these were inherited by the British. So Nagaland was not a state then. Naga Hills was a district in Assam. So as trouble started there for sovereignty, government of India then first of all sent the army, then it sent the spooks, right? So any situation that's handled by the security establishment over time tends to get complicated unless the politicians come in. So politicians came in, and that's how in 1975, Shillong Peace Accord was signed. And in fact, most of the major tribes that constituted Naga federal government under Zapu Angami Fizo, they came over ground and they accepted the Indian constitution. That is something that Muiba, Isaac, Khaplang, etc. repudiated. They did not want it. Now, 57, when Tuensang administrative region was made part of Nagaland, things were so complicated around that time that Naga Hills were being administered. They were part of Assam state, but they were being administered directly by the Ministry of External Affairs. Now, why External Affairs? Don't ask me. Those were very confused times. 50s was a very confused decade for India. So, in fact, a lot of the Naga peace talks also in early days until mid-60s were carried out not by representatives of the Union Home Ministry, but by the Foreign Secretary of India, who was an ICS officer, Indian Civil Service officer, Yezdezad Dinshaw Gundevia. So Gundevia it was who was going to Nagaland and talking to Naga leaders and trying to bring about peace. In 1965, he brought about some kind of a truce, but without any settlement. He was partly successful, and he wrote about his experiences and all that happened, the process, in his book, one of his books, War and Peace in Nagaland. He was also negotiating with Sheikh Abdullah, so he's written a book about that and about other things. Civil servants of those times were also very consummate writers and chroniclers, and they left a lot of history behind. Now, once again, I'll take you back to Mon. So where is Mon? See it on the map. Mon, this entire Tuensang region, generally on an average is about 5,000 feet altitude. 5,000 feet is a bit like, since I know Kasoli, or maybe the altitude of Srinagar the town, right? The valley. 5,000 feet or thereabouts. Again, this also has a peak that's called Veda Peak, which is obviously the highest point in the region. And there on a clear day, you can see Brahmaputra River on the one side and Chindwin River in Myanmar on the other. So that gives you an idea of where this district is located and what its topography is. The Konyaks themselves are about 3 lakh people. I am now making estimates because we only have the data for 2011 census. Nagaland has high population growth rate. So I'd say about 3 lakh Konyaks, but look at the other tribes. The most powerful tribes in Nagaland, politically, even in the underground, have been the Angamis. Fizo was an Angami. The current chief minister, Neiphiu Rio, is an Angami. About 2 lakhs. Aos, a little less than 3 lakhs, about 2,75,000. Many of the prominent leaders have been Ao. For example, S.C. Jamir, who's around, and Prime Minister also mentions him once in a while. S. Chubatoshi Jamir, as he's called. He's been a governor. He's been a central minister. He's a very well-known, probably the best-known Naga politician nationally. There was also a Justice Sema. He's from Sema tribe. Now, the Sema tribe, again, is about 2.5 to 2.75 lakhs. Tangkhuls, that is Muiva's tribe in Manipur, is about 2.5 lakhs. Compared all of them with Konyaks. Konyaks are over 3 lakhs. So they are the largest tribe. If you get them angry, it's very difficult to expect peace in Nagaland or lasting peace in Nagaland. That's why the government is so worried. Modi government has actually invested a lot of political capital in signing a final peace deal with the Nagas. In fact, there was an event in the Prime Minister's house, and you will see the picture several years ago, where he had these leaders of the Naga underground, and he pretty much announced that they had been in accord, and he said, "Maa Bharti ke liye sab ek saath seva karne ke liye tayar hai." But since then, this process has been languishing. As usual, Delhi lets things become out of sight, out of mind. If this is not giving me pain right now in Delhi, why should I bother? Let things drift. So that drift has led to a tragedy like this, and this has jolted the government. Now, how key has Nagaland been to India's national security? So remember, a lot of the debate right now is Armed Forces Special Powers Act. In fact, even today, as the news of this tragedy came out, Nagaland Chief Minister, who's an ally of the BJP, ally of NDA, Neiphiu Ryu, he has tweeted that AFSPA should be withdrawn. It's a terrible loss. Similarly, Conrad Sangma, the Chief Minister of Meghalaya, his party also is an ally of NDA. He's also tweeted that AFSPA should be withdrawn. Chances are, so will the Mizoram Chief Minister say at some point. I think in all of the Northeast, barring the two Chief Ministers of the BJP, that is Assam and Tripura, all others will back this demand. Tripura, by the way, had AFSPA extended to it in 1970, but it was Manik Sarkar's government, CP, the Left Front government, which beautifully, working with the center in Delhi, with the BJP as well as with the Congress, quietly worked to withdraw it police station by police station, police station by police station. And today Tripura does not have Armed Forces Special Powers Act, whereas some districts of Arunachal, particularly districts bordering Mon, have it. So the demand for the withdrawal of this law have to go. And how did this law came into being? So once again, check out. And that's what will tell you how central Nagaland is to India's national security debate and issues. It was on 22nd of May, 1958, that India passed an ordinance. Nehru's India passed an ordinance called Armed Forces brackets Assam and Manipur Special Powers Ordinance, 22nd May 1958. Why Assam and Manipur? So what is AFSPA right now? Assam Armed Forces Special Powers Act was initially called Armed Forces Assam and Manipur Special Powers Act. Why? Because Naga insurgency had broken out. So Naga people also live in Manipur. And that's why Government of India passed this ordinance giving power to the Chief Commissioner of Manipur and the Governor of Assam to declare any area in these regions as a disturbed area where AFSPA could be promulgated. So it was Naga insurgency in a way that brought AFSPA into India. And then Government of India so loved the idea that they've been using it wherever it suits them or wherever it's necessary, because India also had much other trouble later. So there is no one side to this argument. There are multiple sides to this argument, but we are not going into right now. We are only telling you that AFSPA was born in Nagaland, in what used to be Naga Hills at that point of time. It was passed into a law later by Parliament the same year, 11 September 1958. Now, as I was reading up on this incident, I also realized a couple of other things that I didn't know. First of all, there is so much of this low value, inhuman, rat hole type mining going on in these remote districts of Nagaland. It's destroying the environment. It's destroying the forests, it's contaminating the rivers, it's bringing people some kind of a living. But look at these laborers, they are desperately working for very small wages. Can't a great country like India reach out and rehabilitate these people, stop this coal mining, which brings very little value either to the state or to the district or these people, and try and find some kind of rehabilitation and some kind of an alternative way of making a living for them. That is one thing. And in fact, I read up more about this in an article on East Mojo, which is a website that only covers exclusively the Northeast, by a Naga journalist, Medolinho Ambrosia. So thank you very much, Medolinho. And if I don't pronounce your name right, my apologies to you. But I read your story and I figured that of the 49 coal mines in Nagaland, 44 don't even have the approval to mine. So they are just carrying on regardless. I don't know what this mine was like in Mon, but 44 out of 49 being illegal or unauthorized is not a good thing. And finally, before I let you go, there is a video. There are lots of videos coming out, and we have to be careful because we cannot establish the authenticity of any of these. But there is a video in particular posted by Congress Party's General Secretary in Nagaland. So you know it's coming from Congress Party's General Secretary, G.K. Zimomi, which shows you these few happy laborers, obviously tribals of Nagaland, playing music at night with their guitar. So I will just finish this episode of Cut the Clutter with them, because this apparently, Zimomi says that this is a scene or this is a video from the previous evening when they were happy after the day's work. It's the next day when they were coming back, then this terrible thing happened. And we don't know whether it's these people who died or others who died. We don't even know how authentic this video is. But to the extent that it's being shared by fairly authoritative people in Nagaland. I'm sharing it with you and concluding on that note. So please watch these few seconds before you go away.